Alrighty, everybody. We have Stephanie on the line, and she is going to do a presentation on Flow's Rocket Fund. Stephanie, you can go ahead and take it away. And
Okay, well, listen, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Listen, thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you today. And I want to say hello to all who are in the room and to the many that are online. So, what is the Rocket Fund? The Rocket Fund is a grant program that turns out to be a bridge to your first customer. We help you create a relationship that is very hard to build when you're just starting out. And we do that by providing money to help you build your first commercial prototype that you can begin testing with your customer. And why do they like that? For many, this is a very attractive proposition because they will see an innovative product that could help them solve an important business problem at little cost to themselves. And we do all of this program with the partners that you see listed on this slide. So, the Rocket Fund was founded in 2015 by the Emerging Technologies Coordinating Council of Utilities, the Moxie Foundation, which is a family foundation in San Diego, and Caltech. And you can see the logos of our partners at the bottom of the slide. The goal of the Emerging Technologies Coordinating Council is to identify technologies that look promising to be able to help them reach their mandated goals on the grid. And they, in fact, are mandated with bringing them to market faster and easier. The Rocket Fund grew out of working with close to 1,000 entrepreneurs and seeing their needs. We would urge the companies that we were working with to go and talk to the customers, understand how their technology could become a product that they wanted to buy. But unfortunately, the customer would come back and say, well, this looks like a very interesting technology, but it's way too early. Come back in a couple of years when you have something that we can test. Unfortunately, there's precious little money for building that prototype that allows you to do that. We provide you with money that allows you to build what we call the minimum commercial prototype that you can begin testing with customers in such a way that if the prototype matches their specs and perhaps performs as you say it's going to perform, then they will consider buying it. To date, we've made 19 grants, and we've awarded over $600,000, and we've just opened up our next round for this year. This slide gives you a better idea of where we fit in the total ecosystem of funding that's available to you. So on the left-hand side, we start with the innovation pool that sometimes comes from universities, sometimes it comes from your own imagination. Then once you have the idea, you move into startup funding, and you can see the long list of ways that you can find early funding to actually start building your technology. So from family and friends, from CalSEED, from which you'll hear more later, sometimes from competitions, accelerators, incubators. The list is quite long, actually. Some of them take equity, some of them don't. Once you use this money to start your company and begin and build the very early applied R&D version of your technology, then you hit a gap. On the right-hand side, you can see that you can raise money either through investment funding or through grant programs once you have a product identified. But in between, there is no money, and that is where the Rocket Fund comes in. That is the green arrow in the middle of the slide. This graphic really shows, in fact, how we can accelerate you forward. So you start, of course, at a relatively low level of product viability. When you're doing the applied R&D, you're still figuring out your customers, how the technology can be developed into something that will sell. On the right-hand side, you've done all of that work, you've been able to prove it, and on the back of having a viable product, of course, you bring in revenue and you can attract investment. Where the Rocket Fund comes to play is in that dip from applied R&D that's funded by government research sometimes or your own money, and before the revenues start coming in. That is where we can help you bridge what's called the valley of death to get to the right-hand side and begin growing your company. We know that the Rocket Fund, in fact, what it can do is de-risk your technology in such a way that you'll not only be able to attract more grant funding, but also be able to attract investors because, of course, that's appealing to them. They have had technology effectively, the risk taken away without any commitment from themselves. So we've had certainly a number of company wins, although we've only been going for 4 years. You can see a list here of, there's a refrigeration company that raised $12.5 million. Others have raised seed funding or attracted sizable customer contracts. But I'd like to draw your attention to our relationship with CalSEED. 5 companies of ours have actually received CalSEED funding either before they received a Rocket fund or sometimes at the same time. You can see that the two relationships actually work very well together. CalSEED funds the applied R&D stage of you developing your technology. We come along and take the prototype that allows you to work with your customer and refine it into a product. We like to describe our Rocket Fund as free, fast, and flexible. Free, meaning that there is no IP required, it's unencumbered and non-directed. Fast, from application to award, is typically 6 months. So we're open at the moment. We're going to close at the beginning, our applications at the beginning of May, and we hope to make the awards by the end of June. And we're flexible. We're flexible in 2 ways, actually. One is that it is your strategic goals that set how you're going to use our money, as long as it fits with our criteria. And there are minimal reporting requirements. There are some. We are a grant program, and we do track it fairly closely, but we try to keep the touch as light as possible. We know that you're in a hurry, that you need the money, you need to build this prototype very fast in order to be able to secure your customer interest. You'll also get a chance to work with our utility partners who understand the grid marketplace very well. They're all engineers who understand technology, but they know what works. And also, we found that we are a bridge to sometimes to matching funds from other utility programs that can double the amount of money that you get from us. And also, on occasion, they can provide testing facilities that will help you validate your technology and achieve certification. So, what do we cover? We tend to cover things that other grant programs don't. So, for instance, equipment and parts purchasing, something that a lot of federal grants just will not cover. SBIR in particular will not cover that. We cover engineering design and prototype building, certification services and validation testing. This is increasingly needed from the very start of taking your product out of the lab. It can be very expensive, and we can certainly contribute to that. We provide consulting for scaling up a manufacturing. A lot of entrepreneurs, when they start out, this may be the first product that they brought to manufacture, eventually to market. And not all of the stages of doing that are very obvious unless you've done it before. So we can provide some kind of expert consulting that can help you figure that out. And we do, by the way, support software companies. I know that if you look on our website and you see what we funded before, it looks like it's mainly hard tech. But in fact, we have supported software companies as long as they can demonstrate that they have a clear market advantage and that they will be connected in some way to either making the grid more efficient or making manufacturing more energy efficient. Some kind of demonstration of benefit, if you like, to the energy economy. This slide shows that we fund two major areas of technologies. There's what we call the energy track that really relates to the interests that our utility partners and priorities that they are following at the moment. So if you scan down the list, it's the usual things of energy efficiency, storage, microgrid. Increasingly, though, the utilities are looking at distributed energy resources. And if you have technologies that are directed towards that particular application, you should seriously consider the Rocket Fund. This year, we are also adding two new categories, AI and robotics as it applies to Cleantech. So this is a new area that we'll be focusing on as well. And also industrial heat and thermal storage, a very important area that we're just beginning to look at. The second area deals with sustainability, and we kind of say rather crudely that that includes everything else. So from renewables to CO2 mitigation, a very important area. Water energy management is increasingly important to all our utility partners. And certainly an area that Caltech has a special interest in is energy efficient materials, anything that can be contributing again to more efficient manufacturing or solar materials that are more energy efficient, more energy concentrating. That type of thing will be very interesting to us. And you can find the complete list of our technologies at our website. So if you go to, first of all, Caltech, California Institute of Technology, search for First Look West Flow, and then click on the Rocket Fund tab, you'll find a complete descriptor of what the Rocket Fund is about. And in the page, you'll find a link to application deadlines, which give you the complete list. It's quite long of technologies that we will be supporting. Our process is a three-stage application process. So we're open, as I mentioned a moment ago, right now for applications. It's an online system. It's very easy. It'll take you probably about 40 minutes to fill out. Most people find that they have the information to hand already. We operate, as I mentioned earlier, like any grant. What that means is that if you are fortunate to win an award, we will negotiate a memorandum of understanding with you to set milestones against payments and against goals. And we do expect that your project timeline will be 9 to 12 months. In other words, from the time you receive the award to the time that you complete building your prototype and start demonstrating with customers should be between 9 to 12 months. And one thing I will note is that we welcome multiple applications. We've made 2 awards to a few of our companies, but they cannot be in the same year. So what we look for in your application will be a validated lab technology. What I mean by that is ideally that it be third-party validated. It could be because it was government-sponsored research. It could be university research with published papers. It could be just simply that you've accumulated enough data that seems to point your technology in the right direction. We look that you describe your competitive value proposition, in other words, how you are different and how you're innovative and going to be able to secure a niche on the market, that you understand what MVP, TAM, and SAM mean. A lot of people, for instance, will simply quote $1 billion market without being able to break it down into the sub-segments that they will have to approach before they get to the $1 billion market. We look for you to be able to understand those stepping stones. We look that you've been able to identify your initial customer base, and you will be expected to, even at the early stage, the application stage, to be able to explain how you're going to use our money. And the deadline, again, is May the 1st. We do a screening, and after that, the semifinalists go into a due diligence phase where you will be sent a form to fill out that is a more detailed look at your business. And this slide gives you a descriptor of the specifics that we look at. And I would like to draw your attention to one thing is that it's important in this stage that you can detail the customer that you will be working with, the demonstration site, and your plan to being able to set up that demonstration site. You also have to show us in this due diligence form, go beyond just naming or highlighting your customer segments to saying what your path to commercialization is going to look like. And be able to really show us that you understand the competition out there. We know that there's lots of it. We know there are very few game-changing technologies that are going to blow everybody out of the water. It's much more likely that you're going to have a very exciting technology that will find its niche within that crowded marketplace. And so it's important to show us that you understand that.
Hi, Stephanie. Can I ask a question? Can she?
Yes.
It's Nico from the ammonia team.
Yes.
Last year. I have a question about stage one. There's a question in there about describe something in $25,000, $50,000, and $75,000 tranches.
Yes.
Can you help me understand what that meant?
Yes, absolutely. So we give staged awards at those three levels. And what we ask people to do is say, what would you do with the money at each level? So, of course, everybody would like $75,000. But we can't always give $75,000 to all our applicants. What would you do with $50,000? What would you do with $25,000? Typically, people break out the $75 application into 3 stages, if you like. What that does is it doesn't prejudice us at all about how much we'll give you. If we feel that $75,000 is the best use of our money, it will get you to what we call independence. In other words, you're approaching securing your first customer order, then that's what you'll get. Sometimes, though, it's $50,000 actually will be the game-changing stage for you, and we can give you that money to make that happen. Sometimes we can bring in matching funds to be able to match that $50,000. And the same thing for the $25,000. We often find our companies can use that to get started on building the prototype, and then they can bring additional money in to complete the rest.
Does
that answer your question?
It does. Would you recommend breaking it into like time-wise, chronologically, like in the first 3 months we'll spend $25,000 doing this, or just have?
No, it's more a question of what it'll buy. If you go back to the list of things that we fund, in other words, it'll buy, let's say, the materials or the equipment or the parts to be able to build the first iteration of what we're calling the minimal commercial prototype. In other words, beginning to put it together. With $50,000, you can get to the finished commercial prototype that you can then begin working with the customer, or at least take out to a customer. And the $75,000 will be one that's approaching probably a prototype product.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, it's much more about what it will buy. And I would like to point out that companies have come to us saying, well, we don't have yet the beginnings of a commercial prototype that we need your money to build out fully. We're at the design phase. We have a validated lab prototype, but we don't know what it's going to look like as a commercial version, but we need to bring in design services, spend some money on doing that. We fund that. So we'll find the design as well as the building of the prototype.
Thank you.
So I think as the due diligence phase is fairly straightforward. We take these forms, and then our technology advisory committee sits down, goes through them, analyzes them quite closely, and from that group of people and companies, we select our finalists. And these go into stage 3. And this is an in-person pitch day that you will do actually at Caltech in Pasadena. And the pitch day is much more about getting a feel for the business and how well you understand it, whether your team has a plan that you can execute on. I would encourage everybody, when you get to that stage, to really know how you're going to use the funds. I just mentioned with Nico, you know, how important it is to be able to spell out in quite a bit of detail what each stage of funding will buy, what it'll do for you. And the important thing is that we want to see that it'll get you to the point where you're working with the customer, you have to have a demonstration site, and that they are interested in possibly even signing a letter of intent to buy your product, your eventual product, once it completes testing and if it matches their specs and the performance reaches what you said it was going to do. We also need at this point some kind of idea of manufacturing plan, especially what your product might cost at the end of this. We have to feel that you have a realistic plan to becoming what we call independent, in other words, a sustainable company. You may not do it based on the relatively small amount of money we give you, but you have a plan that we will play an integral part in getting you to actually reach your goal. And don't forget on the pitch day, don't hesitate to have an ask. In other words, you know, utility technical support, can we help there? Especially utility testing, connections to potential customers. One of our awardees had an arrangement with it was actually a grocery chain that fell through after about 9 months of a negotiation. And through our utility partners, we were able to connect that company eventually to Walmart, actually. And they restarted their plan. And of course, that was a much better partner for them to be able to collaborate with. So think very carefully on that pitch day what you want us as partners to do for you as well through the vehicle of the Rocket Fund.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you say testing, does that include UL testing?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you have commitments from test centers already to do that?
We have connections to test centers. We can help you arrange that, but we don't have, if you talk about formal commitments, we don't have it. It would be something you would have to negotiate.
All right, and is that a valid use of part of the funds?
Yes, absolutely. We know that it's difficult to find that kind of money, and increasingly you're being asked to get UL testing very early on in your technology development.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah, we know. That's why we try very hard to connect you up with lab testing as well, especially if it's free or relatively free.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions in the room?
I have a question about the deadline. It's May 1st this year, which is a Wednesday, looking at the calendar at 11:09 p.m. Pacific, right? Or when the applications are due?
I believe it's midnight. We set it for midnight that day.
And the projects, the expected timeline is, you said 9 to 12 months?
Yes, after you receive the award, we finish our negotiations, you receive the money. The timeline is between 9 to 12 months. This is really geared for people who are, for companies rather, who have a technology and a customer who says, look, we really would like to see this. We would really want this. And you're in a hurry.
And on the eligibility, it says for ventures who have raised no more than $750,000 equity investments. Is that part of the application, and that's strictly enforced?
Yes, it is. What isn't said so often is that if you've had millions of dollars worth of government grants or any other kind of support, that's fine. We don't look at that. We're glad that you have it. But the investment money, we feel that certainly up to $1 million, once you achieve $1 million investment, you're on your way. And you don't really need something like the Rocket Fund. Now, what can happen, and has happened before, is that people submit an application, they haven't received investment funding, but they're talking to investors, to angel investors typically. And they're given the award and the investment comes in afterwards or sometimes during the process. That's fine. So you just have to have not received any more than $750,000 by the closing of your application.
And yeah, Stephanie, this is Jeff Macon at Fresno State. We've talked.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Your application, but does your application have limitations on how many characters or words can be entered in responses? Does it have limitations, and any suggestions on whether people should be real brief with their responses or really
Yeah, there are limitations. We feel that they're fairly generous, though, particularly when it comes to describing your technology. We know that sometimes it's not easy to reduce it to just a few pitch words. We really want to understand a little bit about your technology and how you feel it's innovative, and the status of its development, and in particular the data, the validation that you've achieved. So certainly try to be succinct. Being wordy unnecessarily doesn't help your application, because then we have to kind of work through it. But we've tried to be fairly generous about the wordage.
And you note TRL level 5 through 7.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This might be jargon if anybody has questions, ask about that. But what are some of those outlying areas where you not accept an application if it's too early in the TRL, technology ready?
Yeah, let me, for those that maybe aren't comfortable with the TRL levels, the way that we regard it is, and this is, by the way, spelled out on the website too, you'll see a link to the Department of Energy TRL levels, just so that you understand it more. But very quickly, technology readiness levels refer to the status of the technology. So it starts as a concept, TRL 1. It goes through lab development as a research project, TRL 2. Then it begins to move into applied R&D, where it begins to look like it might have a commercial application. That's TRL 3. TRL 4 is typically a lab demonstration, benchtop demonstration type of project. So you can demonstrate that it works in the lab, but it's a small scale. If we jump up, TRL 7 and 8 and 9 is all about, you have a product. It could be an early stage product, TRL 7. TRL 8 and 9 is about scaling it up and manufacturing it. But the TRL 5 to 7, that's the gap that we play in, which is where you need a commercial prototype, you're developing it, and you're trying to test it in the real world, because you're going to have to do a lot of adjustment probably to turn it into a product. So that happens between TRL 5 and TRL 7, and that's typically what we look for.
And are there any gotchas in the application in terms of anything that might disqualify an application? Some of the top things.
Yeah, you were asking about whether it's it could be too early. Too late, if you have a product already, and particularly, of course, if you sold a product, you're too late for the Rocket Fund, because we feel that at that point you really are not developing a prototype anymore. You've got something that you can sell. However, we have looked, and we will look at young companies who are still very small and need help with developing, let's say, the next generation of the product that's going to really lift them into independence. So the first so-called product might have been just to bring in some revenue, maybe a few $100,000 a year, but they need help in developing the next generation of that, which might be literally just a few months away, in order to really bring in the customer base that they need to grow their company. We do look at that. On the other end, the earlier end, if you are still developing your lab prototype and still proving it, looking for proof of concept, that's too early.
Another question, are there any limitations that you're looking at based on the TAM and SAM?
Yeah. No, not at all. I'm asked about market size a lot because we know that typically investors want to see, if that's the way that you're going to grow your company, want to see billion-dollar markets. And we certainly like to see that the market that you are playing in is very large. But we are realistic enough to know that typically most companies aren't going to get to that point of revenue. It's much more, we look at a sizable size. It has to make sense actually for you to be developing the company, the technology, and growing the company at all. But there isn't really a minimum size, apart from the fact if it's something as small as 10 million, we feel that that's more of a lifestyle company. than one with a product that's actually going to bring in revenue, sizable revenue. What we do look for is that you understand each of those subcategories of your eventual market. I find that still people really just talk about the billion-dollar size. They don't talk about how they're going to get there, the stepping stones. And we know that you have to do that in order to be able to reach the bigger marketplace eventually. So you have to really understand how you're going to develop your product at each stage to address those markets.
So with that market strategy in mind, do you prefer a bottom-up market?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And these technologies have to be sold commercially in California is an end goal?
No, not at all. And I'm asked actually whether we're confined to California. We're not. We've taken applications from across the country. We do ask that companies have an interest in setting up a presence in California. And we certainly want to help you build your markets outside of California.
Stephanie, we have a question that came through the chat.
Yeah.
Is there a secured laboratory space for testing and demonstration? Can we leverage this to reduce the cost of demonstration?
So, not quite sure I understand the point, but if you've already got your secure lab space where you can test it, then our money actually can be used in other ways. It can be used towards achieving UL certification in connection with the lab testing that you're doing. I'm not sure that answers the question, but you're free to use the money in whatever way, leverage it in whatever way you can.
Now let me piggyback on that perhaps. Are there some things that make an application look stronger? Like in the case of that entrepreneur, what if they already have lab testing set up and so the funding they're looking for is say for the UL testing or something kind of further down the road? Does that score higher?
It helps, for sure. But in the end, for sure, it helps, of course. But in the end, what really counts as far as a Rocket Fund award is concerned is A, the technology. Is it not only innovative, but is it marketable? Does it have a commercial future? The second thing is there a plan actually, a credible plan for using our money? We've often have to go back and renegotiate these plans because they're too vague or they're just simply global. They don't actually break it out enough. So that is really important. The third thing is definitely impact as well. Impact either in energy savings or sometimes it'll be CO2 mitigation. We do look for that as well. So I'm not saying that it wouldn't be an added advantage. It is, but I wouldn't go out and try to secure it before you apply for a Rocket Fund.
Stephanie, you said something important. You said global distinction in the application versus a specific distinction. You prefer a specific distinction. Do you have examples of things like an application saying we want $10,000 for certification, but they don't specify, where you would see, hey, we want $10,000, which includes a UL certification, and being real specific? Is that along the lines of what you're talking about? Yeah,
let me be quite clear about that. Typically now, applications will actually, to the point that they'll actually list the line items that they will buy with our funds, if it's a hard tech type of project. So in stage one, let's say for $25,000, they'll list the things that they will buy, the pieces of equipment that they'll buy, or the consulting services they'll buy, or the lab services that they need. Stage two will take that package and be able to add different, more equipment onto it, be able to begin building out the test sites, if you like, with that money. Then the third one will be the certification that they need. The third element, they'll spell out how they're going to achieve certification, how they're going to work with the customer that is actually going to be maybe taking over the testing of the prototype. So it's quite specific. eventually in how they use the money. And as an example of where we received an application, it was a software company that basically said that they wanted to create a user interface for their particular technology that had to do with, well, I shouldn't say actually, doesn't matter. But it was literally, that was it. I mean, there was just a few lines that said they wanted to create a better interface actually to be able to access the grid. That obviously required a lot more explanation as to how they were going to use the money and to enable that.
We have one more question on regards to the TRL. We have reached TRL 4 and we are working along TRL 5. Would it still be fundable by Rocket Fund?
Yes, absolutely.
And can people ask questions before the May 1st deadline? Can they reach out on the website to?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. We very much want people to do that. You can call me up. You can read what's on the website, first of all. Start the application, open an account, and then if you have questions, you go through it, come back to me. You can modify it right up to the deadline. You could, I probably shouldn't say this, but you can even submit it. Supposing you think that, well, I've reached the point where I want to submit it, want to get it done, get it in, and then something happens after you submit it, no problem, submit another one. I always take the most recent one. But I really encourage everybody to, by all means, contact me, and we'll try to be as helpful as we can to ensure that you get a good application in.
We had one more question that came through the chat.
Yeah.
This is a structural technology that can be used to support solar PV canopies over parking and roads. That was tested for highway binge beams and mine shoring columns. That they're really strong between 1970 and 1995 and surpassed expectations. Could you pay for engineering analysis using today's software and earthquake standards?
You know, we haven't actually received an application, but I think we would consider it, yes.
Then we have one. Is the detailed information about the business technology confidential? What can you do to protect our trade secret?
Yeah, I'm asked that very frequently. I have to say that we don't sign non-disclosure agreements. We take the position that really they're not really worth very much in the end. And you have to accept that your application will be seen by the Technology Advisory Committee and our review panel. But we do not publish anything. It does not go out to the general public. What I advise people to do is to consult, if you have an IP legal support, consult with them about what you can disclose on your application, and then eventually in conversation on the due diligence form, and then in conversation with our review panel. We do need to see enough technical detail that will explain how you're innovative and how you're going to carve out your own place in the marketplace. So you have to strike a balance there.
The question is, are granted patents or patents pending a plus in this process?
Yes, definitely. That is definitely a plus. Seeking, you can be just seeking IP. They could be provisional, that's fine, but the fact that there is something that you think is protectable, yes, is a commercial advantage.
Well, how about granted patents?
Yes, same thing, of course, yes.
Okay.
Even better.
And Stephanie, back to that text question about if it's only a trade secret, you explained that, you know, you don't sign NDAs, you have a review committee, it doesn't go public. You've been doing this program for 4 years, and I'm sure a number of applications. Have you ever had an issue with any trade secret information getting out to anybody? I'm just kind of.
Yeah, no, we never have. As it happens, we've never had a problem that way. The one thing I will point out that I'm going to talk about in a couple of slides is that we have channel relationships with our members, and they include EPRI, they include ITRON, they include ANSYS. So you have to understand that they will at some point see your application, at least a high-level descriptor of your application. It won't be something detailed, but keep that in mind when you're thinking about protecting what's proprietary. And I would encourage anybody who really has concerns about that to give me a call, and we'll see if we can work something out.
Stephanie, if it's okay with you, can the Blue Tech Valley team share this PowerPoint with the participants?
Absolutely. Yep. Yes.
Stephanie, can you give us your contact information?
I'm actually only halfway through the slides, and it's at the end. So why don't I finish off the presentation, and then I'll make sure that everybody knows what my contact information is.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. So we're on stage 3. In fact, we've covered a lot of the information that I'm going to give in the next couple of slides, so we can really motor right through it. But there is a stage after you win the award. We do negotiate what we call a memorandum of understanding. It's not legally binding at all. What it is, though, is a clear understanding about what you expect, what goals you expect to achieve with our money, so that we're all on the same page about that. We will expect you to report. We've created a one-page quad report. I'm told that it's really time effective. It consists of bullet points that talks about achievements, milestones, challenges that you still face. And we find that people are quite happy to fill those in. It helps keeps you straight about the progress that you're making as well. And we scheduled regular teleconferences at the same time. And the calls are mostly to see how you're getting along and see if we can help. It's not just to check in about your progress, but to see what more support we can give you. We do look at metrics. We have to, certainly for our funders, they expect us to do that. And at some point, we'll come back to you and actually collect those metrics. Sometimes it'll be energy, if it's appropriate, it'll be energy savings, or if you've had an impact on the CO2. But much more often, it's like the conventional metrics that you would want, investment or new funding sources, maybe signed up some customers, customer orders, any additional funding that you've attracted. And we'll do that twice at the end of the project and typically 1 year later. These are the dates. I've already gone through them to give you an idea. The application closes at midnight on May the 1st. We go through the due diligence process I mentioned with where the Technology Advisory Committee will review the semi-finalists, the ones that have made it through. We will ask you for due diligence, for you to fill out due diligence forms. The review meeting will then select those that will proceed to the final round, which will be in person at Caltech in Pasadena. That will happen. We haven't fixed the date yet. That'll be between June the 1st and June 15th. And then the last 2 weeks of June, we expect to be able to make the awards, announce the awards, go into MOU negotiations and finalize the documentation that goes with this. And typically after that, payment can come quite fast. It's processed through the Caltech's accounting system. And as long as the documentation is set up correctly, then it proceeds within 2 to 3 weeks. I mentioned that we have partnerships, channel partnerships with our members. They're listed here. Let me describe how the one with the Electric Power Research Institute works so that you can get an idea of how they all work. What happens with EPRI is that they will see a summary, spreadsheet summary of all the applications that describes the technology, the use of funds, the funding received to date, of course, the product and the product application. And from that, they select a few or many that will match their member interests. For those of you not familiar with the Electric Power Research Institute, it's a nonprofit that has all the major utilities, not just in the U.S., but actually internationally, that are have become members. And they do research on behalf of these members. And once they select those rocket fund companies that are of interest to their members, they'll come back to you, probably want more information, but they can help you with lab testing and validation and technical support. They're a very highly regarded institution, and if you get their support and their stamp of approval on your technology, then you're well on your way to getting your certification, getting customer interest. I had mentioned that we have Rocket Fund successes. We have 3 companies that have received multi-million-dollar contracts. You saw them listed earlier. 4 companies that have raised seed rounds, and then one's gone on to raise $12.5 million in investment. The companies also that go through a Rocket Fund, because we've established some kind of validation reputation, are able to use this on their applications for bigger funding. So we were part of, if you like, letters of support that went into funding applications for funding from CEC, ARPA-E, SBIR grants. And I don't say that the Rocket Fund was absolutely essential, but it certainly contributes. And as I pointed out, we have 5 companies that have received CalSEED awards. And one of them, actually, it was announced, that's PowerFlex, received the 2nd level award, the prototyping award that's also being offered by CalSEED. It was one of 4 companies. So these are the contacts. First of all, to get to the Rocket Fund on the website, you go to Caltech, first of all, and then type in First Look West or FLOW. Once you get to the FLOW homepage, you'll find the Rocket Fund as a tab there, and there's actually some information and links on the homepage. And if you just click through, you'll find everything, including the application portal to the Doodle website where you can start submitting your application. That's my email on the side, and if you've got some kind of pen handy, I can give you my telephone number as well. My office number is 626-395-1968. My cell phone, I don't mind you calling me on my cell phone, it's 626-818-5092.
Thank you, Stephanie. We had another chat
Yeah.
too, and they said secured large OEMs, partners or supporters of our research roadmap with in-kind equipment and support of that sort. Would this count in your favor or disqualify you?
No, it's awesome. That's exactly what we want to see. No, that's definitely a plus.
Good. Does anyone ever have any questions in here? And again, if you have questions through the webinar, please send them through the chat. I don't see anything.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for attending and asking such great questions, and we hope to see your applications.
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Okay.
Someone have a question? Yeah.
Oh, I just said thanks.
Oh. Alrighty, thank you, Stephanie.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for your patience. Up next we have Joy from the CalSEED, and she will be presenting on how to apply for these applications.
Thank you for having me today. Really excited to be here. It was great to see Stephanie's presentation before because there's a lot of similar vernacular. I think one of the 2 main differences between Rocket Fund and CalSEED is that CalSEED is designed really for earlier stage startups and innovations, and it's also a government grant and its use of public funds. So there's a few more details about the application process that might be different from what you see in Rocket Fund. So today I'll go through a really quick overview of the CalSEED program and what it is. I'll talk a little bit about your entrepreneur journey once you're part of the CalSEED program. After that, I'll talk about eligibility. That's why you're here, right? You want to figure out if you're eligible, how to apply, what kinds of questions you'll see on the application. So we'll talk more about how it works, the review process, how your applications will be reviewed. And then I'm going to throw out a lot of dates throughout my talk, so at the end we'll sum up that timeline in the final slide. So CalSEED stands for California Sustainable Energy Entrepreneur Development Initiative. It is a funding program from EPIC. EPIC is the Electric Program Investment Charge. It's a small charge that's added to all electricity bills across the state of California. It goes into a big R&D fund, and one of the programs that is funded through that R&D program is CalSEED, and it's made possible by the California Energy Commission. So I work at California Clean Energy Fund, and we administer the CalSEED program for the CEC. So we're not the CEC, but we work very closely with them, and we're subject to a lot of their flow down terms, a lot of their requirements. And we are here at CalSEED to help you try to navigate some of these larger bureaucratic processes. You heard Stephanie talk a little bit about prototype award, follow-on funding, and I want to talk about kind of the two different stages of the CalSEED program. The first stage is the concept award. That is for $150,000. It's targeted for concept development and assistance, again, very early stage innovation, early stage startups, and we'll go through a little bit more about what is involved in that in a few slides. That is the application window that's coming up. From March 1st through March 11th is the application window for this concept award. All CalSEED concept award awardees can compete in a business plan competition at a chance to win an additional $450,000 called the Prototype Award. And this is follow-on funding that is available only to CalSEED awardees. That's for really building up your business plan and trying to get you to the next TRL, the next stage of business development.
So what is the TRL cutoff?
I'll go through that in just a couple slides, much earlier than Rocket Fund. So to administer this program at CalSEED, we are a group of 3, sometimes 4 people who work to administer the grants. The way we provide everything is through partnerships, really. We work with the Berkeley Lab, we work with Cleantech Open. All of our awardees go through the Cleantech Open Accelerator program in the summer. I'll talk about that in a couple slides. We work closely with Grant Farm. If you're not familiar with Grant Farm, you should be. They do a lot to help entrepreneurs navigate state funding systems and stay in compliance with their grants. I definitely recommend looking at their website. They also send out emails about grant funding opportunities, so that's a great resource for you. We work with the Center for Energy Research, the Center for Sustainable Energy, the UC Davis Energy Efficiency Center. Those institutes really help us put out the framework and capture all the metrics that we use to evaluate the success of the program. But they also serve as subject matter experts to our awardees. We work closely with the Greenlighting Institute to help us keep an equity lens on all of our programming, and I will talk about that in a few more slides. And we also work with a law firm, Umberg Zipser, to help you guys with IP considerations. We're part of a much larger ecosystem. Blue Tech Valley is a big player in this ecosystem. We're also connected to Cyclotron Road, the Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator, and the Southern California Energy Innovation Network. If you're not on mailing lists for these regional clusters, I highly recommend you get on them. They send out great funding opportunities, webinar opportunities, professional development opportunities, really valuable resources for you. All CalSEED awardees are kind of immediately plugged into this ecosystem. So it's kind of another advantage to the CalSEED program. So what happens when you get a CalSEED award? Obviously grant money is big. Grant money is awesome. In the beginning of the contracts, it's usually kind of begins at the beginning of the year. We're just now onboarding our second cohort. So upon winning the award, we'll enter into a contract. So we'll go through your scope of work, your milestones, your reporting, payments, all that kind of administrative stuff. The CalSEED team does present a series of webinars to help with professional development. Then you're automatically enrolled in Cleantech Open's summer program. You can apply to Cleantech Open as you want. That application is, I believe it opens on May 1st. Anybody can apply. I don't know what the fee is, but it's not cheap. But as a CalSEED awardee, that fee is waived. You're automatically accepted to the program. Through Cleantech Open, you will develop a lot of business documents, try to piece together a business plan, and then in the fall, you will enter a business plan competition, and that's where all CalSEED awardees compete for that follow-on funding. So that's only open to CalSEED awardees, and all of the stuff that you create in Cleantech Open really sets you up to compete well and put your best foot forward. There's also some other showcases involved with CTL. I'll get to that in just a second. So you get grant dollars, which is awesome. Everybody needs grant dollars. But we also connect you to this larger innovation ecosystem in California. It's one of the biggest in the world. There's mentorship opportunities. There's online training opportunities. There's a little bit of legal counsel to help you with IP. Again, connections to the original innovation clusters, acceptance to CTO, and then you're part of a broader CalSEED community. We have 2 cohorts now, so you can connect with other awardees. The Cleantech Open Accelerator program is really, it's like a business training program for people who are a little more technical focused, maybe, who are so kind of involved in the technology and developing use cases and all the product stuff, that there's some considerations to running a business and doing a startup that Cleantech Open can help provide. There's academies, there's webinars, there's regional trainings. They provide business clinics, pitch clinics that help you refine your pitch and your elevator spiel. They match you to different mentors who have expertise in the market that you're trying to enter or the technology that you're trying to develop, as well as kind of general startup, people who've been through the startup roller coaster that you're all going through. They also provide access to more capital. So they do connect you with potential investors. They do connect you with some VC firms, some pitch panels, a lot of networking opportunities. They have a couple of showcases where you can practice your pitch presentation. You can give your pitch presentation to panels, and you can pitch in front of investors. There are different kind of tiered awards within their award system. So it's just kind of another opportunity for you to practice your pitch, give your pitch, try to generate some excitement around your innovation, and potentially get follow-on funding. So the part that you're all looking for here is eligibility. Who can apply and what kinds of projects are funded? We're looking for individuals, teams of people. You can be an individual, you can be a business, you can be part of a nonprofit organization. We're looking at independent labs, community groups, and other kinds of collectives. And the basic requirements. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because this is where some of the eligibility requirements have changed for 2019. So CalSEED is geared towards super early stage innovations. So Stephanie did a great job of going through the technical readiness levels. We're looking at TRLs 2 through 4. So Rocket Fund is a little bit later stage. We're looking for super early stage development. Because this money comes from EPIC funds, there's a very strong focus on benefits to California electricity ratepayers. So on the application, you're going to be asked to identify what kinds of benefits your innovation can bring to ratepayers.
When you say readiness levels 2 to 4, if you're at 4 and ready to go to 5, are you eligible?
Potentially. It depends on other areas of your application. Yeah, I mean, I think that you would get through the eligibility screening if you are TRL 4.
Okay, so if we have a laboratory prototype that's working, we would be eligible?
I'll go through this in a couple slides. We'll really dig into what early stage means.
Okay.
So to continue here, it is, because it is California ratepayers, you do need to be based in California. You're located in California, you need to provide a California address, and you need to be in good standing with the California Secretary of State. Some startups are, incorporated in Delaware, which is fine. You just have some paperwork with the state to show that you're in good standing with the state of California. We do have a $1 million private funding cap for a very similar reason. This is specific to private funding, not government grants. And the kind of the cutoff here is the application date. So how much private funding you've raised at the time of application. Anything you've raised after that is awesome. You should take it. And it doesn't apply towards this cap. The concept should be pre-demonstration scale. I'm going to go through a couple slides to show the technology areas and what's in scope, what's out of scope. And there's also a very strong equity component to the CalSEED program. So we're looking for social and environmental impact at scale as well. So I'll go through that a little bit deeper in a few more slides. So this year we are narrowing the scope of technologies that we're funding. There's 3 big areas. Within energy efficiency, I'm just going to read this out loud because that's the best way to get the information across. We're looking for solid state lighting, electric heat pumps, non-vapor compression cooling, advanced materials and coatings for windows, building envelope, or water, wastewater treatment, or industrial electrification. Within renewable generation, we're looking specifically for solar PV systems or solid state energy harvesting using thermoelectrics, thermionics, or piezoelectrics. Within energy storage, we're looking for battery storage, flywheels, or thermal storage. We do fund hardware, we fund software, we fund integrated solutions. So here you can kind of see what's in scope and what's out of scope. So if you have a hardware innovation, we consider that to be physical components that require design and testing. It can be manufacturing equipment, it can be sensors, it can be transmission, distribution, and infrastructure improvements. You're too late stage and you're out of scope if your innovation or the project that you're proposing is financing for an existing technology. If you're looking to scale up manufacturing, if you already have a commercial scale prototype, those are too late stage. This is really for super early stage innovations. In software, we're looking for software that's like crazy inventive. We're looking for state-of-the-art science here. We're looking for new ideas, new solutions that can provide grid control, algorithms for grid control and reliability. We're looking for Internet of Things applications. Is always a good thing to apply with. We're looking for demand response solutions. When it comes to software, the CalSEED grant is not meant to fund anything for customer acquisition. It's not meant for games, apps, building out websites for your company, and it's not meant for training or workforce development platforms. It's really looking at increasing grid reliability, increasing safety, those kinds of electricity-focused things. When you look at combining software and hardware, what we're looking for is microgrid solutions. we're looking for building efficiency optimization, and we're looking for community access to clean energy. Unfortunately, we're not looking for anything that is not novel. So we do want to see novel concepts in these applications. And we're not going to really consider anything that is considered single or non-replicable solutions. So we do want something that's early stage, but it needs to be scalable. So early stage for hardware, this can include a project that you're proposing for analytic studies or modeling, proof of concept, basic functionality validated in a lab. For software, we're looking for alpha versions. You could propose a project that is just getting your preliminary requirements defined, or something where you're just trying to get the basic coding down. For integrated solutions, again, super early stage, so just some preliminary mapping or combining, if that's your proposed project, that is within scope. Anything that needs maybe minimal integration, it doesn't have to be this huge elaborate integrated idea just yet. If you're doing some early testing, or if you're just looking to identify system components. At the other end, what's not eligible because it's too advanced, you're probably considered to be too late stage if your prototype works smoothly, if it's been debugged or it's considered operational. If it's beyond a pilot scale prototype, that's too late stage. If it's currently being manufactured, if it's certified or commercialized, those are too late stage. If it's successfully already integrated into a larger system, that's too late stage. If it's software and you're working on your beta version, that's too late stage. If you have a full-scale demonstration, that's too late stage. And all of these things, I think that there are other CEC programs, funding programs that are available for these later stage technologies. The CalSEED program is not designed for that purpose. So if you are generating any revenue or profit, or if you have existing customers, that's probably too late stage. And I want to specify customers from partners or supply chain, or, you know, I think that there's a little bit of gray area here where you could be partnering with somebody who can give you some feedstock, or somebody who can give you components, or somebody who can help you with some consulting services with regards to figuring out your market segmentation and all of that. That's different than having paid customers. So just to draw that distinction. Yep.
Can I ask a question on here on this point where it says software classified as beta would not qualify, but what about hardware? Is a new version of it, a pivot of the technology? Any thoughts on if, you know, a secondary version of a hardware might qualify or not?
I think it would kind of circle back to the technology readiness level. So if you have something that needs, you're still doing some design and you're iterating on the design, I think that's applicable. If it's already been debugged, if you've already worked everything out, that's probably too late stage. Good question. Because there's these technology areas are kind of a hardware focus. So that's a good question. So equity is a big component of the CalSEED program. I want to kind of take a step back for a second and really place a definition on what we mean when we say equity. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this because you'll see it all over the application, because it's also an important concept. As this is state funding, we do want to make sure that, as it is state funding, we do want to make sure that we're upholding the principles of state funding priorities. And so if you compare equality with equity, many of you have probably seen this slide or a very similar slide. It's a really simple explanation of the difference between equality and equity. If equality is an equal distribution of resources, it fails to recognize that people come from a different place, that people come from different starting points with regards to access to resources, access to different knowledge centers, R&D, access to electricity. Social equity really refers to the fair and just distribution of the benefits and burdens. And so you can see in equity, this equity middle slide, the person on the right who is shorter has more boxes so that they can see over the fence and see the soccer game. And so it's an equitable distribution of boxes because the benefit from the boxes is the same among all of those people. It's not completely far-fetched from an explanation of our energy system. Why should you be concerned with this as an energy entrepreneur? You should be concerned with it because lower income households spend a disproportionate amount of their income on energy. And so here on this graph, you can see on the x-axis, the annual household income in California is split into 5 different percentiles. On the y-axis, it's the percentage of their income that they spend on electricity. And so the lowest 20%, the households with the lowest 20% of income spend the highest proportion, almost 10% of their income on electricity. And so the CalSEED program is really looking for innovations that can not only lower the cost of energy, obviously, but innovations that can provide economic opportunities in disadvantaged communities or places where economic opportunities don't already exist. We're looking for innovations that can increase access to clean energy generation, energy efficiency technologies, energy storage. We're looking for innovations that can decrease pollution burden in disadvantaged communities. We're looking for innovations that can be located or co-located in areas that are close to disadvantaged communities. And we're looking for innovations that could have the potential to build strong community partnerships as well. So you're going to see questions on the application related to these kinds of impacts. Let me go through the application process. I'm going to skip ahead really quick. So there's an eligibility application and there's a full application. In the eligibility application, you're going to be asked to identify which impacts your innovation could potentially have. In the full application, you will be asked to explain those impacts. So the eligibility application opens March 1st. It's a 10-day application window. It goes until March 11th. It's a couple pages. It can take you up to an hour to complete. After that, CalSEED team and our partner organizations are going to do a screening of all the applications. Any application that passes the screening will be invited back to submit a full application. Again, there's another 10-day time period for that full application. And that application could potentially take up to 10 hours to complete. We've done surveys, and the range of time that people spend filling out the application is from 6 to 10 hours. And I think it depends on, if you have answers to these questions readily available, it's easy to kind of copy and paste into the application. Some people like to spend a lot of time really kind of polishing and refining what they're putting in the application. I'm anticipating one of Jeff's questions here. On the eligibility application, there will be some multiple choice questions, but then there will be some boxes where you can fill in answers to the questions. We've tried to break out the questions to be kind of, not simple questions, but kind of ask one thing at a time in each question. It will be clear in the form how many words you can use to answer the question. So those questions will ask you to describe your clean energy concept. It will also ask to disclose how much private funding you have raised to date. And again, we're going to ask you to identify the potential for community impact once your innovation is scaled. Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm still struggling with the social equity portion.
Sure.
You're looking for, I've worked with the CEC a lot. I work at UC Merced, and we see these questions on all of our applications. It sounds like, but the concept of creating technologies that facilitate equity is still a bit strange to an organization that's purely focused on the improvement of technology.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm reading you correctly.
Well, no, I recognize that that can be a challenge, but I think that it's helpful to kind of go back to your original motivation for doing it, and why do you want to invent this technology? I mean, of course, everybody wants to commercialize and make money.
For a lower cost, cleaner air.
Exactly.
Lower cost, cleaner air, and we are a disadvantaged community.
Okay.
So Merced is. So anything we do in Merced
Is awesome.
presumably will benefit rather than further disadvantage.
Right.
But for instance, we're here today, we're thinking about LED lighting, which was the first thing, solid state lighting was the first thing you list.
Mm-hmm.
Now, solid state lighting in and of itself would benefit all users equally, right? If it's in fact better than what's out there now.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me you're also asking us to benefit disadvantaged users more than advantaged users. I mean, you're grading us based on,
So,
like it's a different, it's kind of a different scale.
well, it's a different go-to-market strategy, I
Right.
think.
Okay.
Right.
So okay.
So the technology, because right now you're pretty early stage.
Yeah.
And so your innovation is going to reduce costs down the road.
Right.
Check.
Yes.
For the eligibility
Okay.
application.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then on the eligibility application, you check that box.
Right. Okay.
With the full application, it's a matter of you articulating how reducing energy costs can benefit disadvantaged communities.
Okay. And you kind of give us a bit of a roadmap there, because you say if this can save on people's electric bills, it will save more for people in lower income. Unfortunately, it will save more in lower income communities. So for example, if we were doing something, let's say, lighting for community theaters. Well, there's community theaters in Los Angeles and San Francisco, but there's also community theaters in Merced and Mariposa, and so proportionally it could be of greater benefit to those communities. But I think that kind of gets lost.
Well, and we're not asking for your go-to-market strategy in the full application.
Right.
Right. So if that's your target market, that's awesome. You can talk about what your target market is.
Right.
But in terms of grading, the score is going to be about the potential that it has for reducing costs for low-income communities.
Right.
Even if there is still cost savings for communities that are not low-income or disadvantaged,
Right.
there's still a benefit for low-income and disadvantaged communities.
Because I've been around here for like 10 years and we're still always, there's this objective of serving and improving low-income communities. And I think we all struggle with that because as much as I would love to help low-income communities, oftentimes the solutions we develop are, we can't shoehorn. There's a lot of challenges with low-income communities, and we can't shoehorn them into that, So I appreciate the objective, but it's very, sometimes it can be really hard to picture this as being a solution specifically for low-income communities. And that's true of most of the technologies that are developed at the UC. We're actually problem solving for advantaged communities, let's just say it. We're problem solving for advantaged communities because most of our student body and most of the technologies we work on are used by advantaged communities. That's what I wrestle with on a daily basis. So as someone who would like to do more to serve disadvantaged communities, what I wrestle with is the solutions model is mismatched with the problems model.
Well, but I think that's the challenge in any sort of clean tech innovation is bridging that gap. I don't think that, creating a solution for a disadvantaged community automatically excludes an advantaged market.
I agree with you.
And I don't think that, you know, kind of investing in sustainable solutions is a disadvantage to your ROI. You know, I think that the sweet spot is bridging those two things.
Yeah, okay.
And so if you can demonstrate how your technology can do both of those things at the same time, that's what you want to do in your application.
Okay, thank you.
I hear your concern. I'm just trying to help you.
I mean, I still haven't got, that is probably one of the hardest questions that confronts us in California. I don't expect you to be able to give a straight answer to that question, because it's probably technology specific. But
And it can turn into a really long
yeah, it is. So I don't want to extend it anymore. Jake has a
Thank you for your question. I think I hear you. That's a topic that occupies many people's thoughts.
Yeah. How about disaster area, like the Paradise? You know.
Oh yeah. Yes, it's definitely a disadvantaged community, and increasing access to energy there is needed.
Exactly.
So if you can identify that as one of a potential users, you should. And in the CalSEED applications, you should lead with that.
Could you explain a little bit more about increased access? Increased access to what?
Increasing access to clean energy generation, efficiency technologies, or storage. So a good example here is that renters cannot necessarily access solar panels, right? They can put solar panels on their rented homes, but they can buy into community-based solar organizations. And so if you're increasing community access, if you're increasing access to these technologies to people that would not otherwise have access to them.
But not necessarily access to a higher standard of living. It has to be specifically access to energy.
Yes, because it is an energy grant.
What about reporting on the efficiency of energy? As opposed to actually having I'm a reporter, so I don't produce anything.
Got it.
Reporters. But I've found I do a lot of reporting, and I find that sometimes the folks out there don't know what's available, and that might be one of the biggest problems you guys have.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if there'd be any grant opportunity in that or not. Jeff asked me once what my skill was. I said my technical skill is typing.
Which is a great skill.
That's not a bad skill.
I'm not a great typer, so I appreciate your
I'm
skill.
not a great typer either.
I mean, unfortunately, it is a technology focus. So if there's software in there somewhere.
So you need a CTO, Chief Technical Officer, perhaps.
Thank you. Yeah, so the time on my old VCR still blinking.
Okay, well, I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Going back to the timeline. So the eligibility application can take up to an hour to complete, some multiple choice questions, some fill in the blanks. Then there's going to be a week or two in between the full application and the eligibility screening for us to screen all of the applications. Any application that passes through all the eligibility screening will be invited back to submit a full application. We're going to ask for additional information about your concept and its potential benefits. And again, you know, there are word limits to the answers, but we kind of break out the questions into kind of a single, it's not like describe your concept and your go-to-market strategy and your innovation and your benefits and your market and, you know, all of this stuff in one question. It will be describe your innovation, describe potential competitors, describe benefits to California ratepayers. You know, it's kind of step by step walking you through all of the things that we're going to be looking for. We're also going to ask about your team and your entity, your organization, what kind of organization you have, your team members, their background. There's going to be opportunities to attach supporting documentation. You can attach letters of support. If you have them, please include them. They look awesome on your application. And I want to jump into the review process to kind of let you know what the technical advisory committees are going to be looking for in your applications. So there's three big kind of areas, three big technical advisory committees that are going to be looking at your application. Yeah.
Before we move forward, I have a question on the previous slide. You said letters of support. There's a diversity of different letters that you could attain. You could do like very technical ones. You could do customer interest ones. You could do from a venture capitalist. Do you have any sense of, from what, are you looking for customer support type things or from technical type things?
Technical things do support your application. Customer support does support your application. However, if you have customers, you're too late stage. So if you have like the potential for a client, the potential for customers, people you've identified in your market who would be customers, anything that they have to include in a letter of support would be helpful.
Just thinking out, how about letters of support from potential customers in disadvantaged communities? Would that?
That's even better. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was good.
Okay. Okay, so there's four big things that the technical advisory committees are going to look for. They're going to look at your innovation. You're going to be asked to provide a really simple scope of work. What you would do with $150,000. You won't be held to that scope of work should you get the award. But what are you thinking you want to do with the award? What do you want to achieve? The technical advisory committee that was going to look at your innovation is going to make sure that your project goals are achievable with the money and with the team. They're going to look to see that you understand the key technical and commercial challenges of your innovation. And they're going to look to see if the project would improve upon existing products or solutions. There is an impact advisory committee, and they're going to be looking at the benefits to California ratepayers. And so they're the ones that are going to evaluate how you make your case for your innovation's benefits to disadvantaged communities, whether that's increasing access to clean energy technology, reducing pollution burden, presenting job opportunities, building community partnerships, all of the things that you keep hearing throughout. Anything EPIC related, CEC related, throughout this presentation. Yeah.
If you came up with a better street light, would that somehow benefit California ratepayers?
If it's saving money, yeah, if it's a more efficient street light.
Okay.
Yeah, anything that reduces electricity use
Okay.
is really.
So in that case, the city would be the ratepayer?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're looking for innovations that increase reliability, reduce costs, increase safety, really energy specific things that can benefit ratepayers. There's another technical advisory committee that's going to look at your readiness and your team. So they're going to, again, look at your scope of work and how you propose using the funding. They're going to look at what the project milestones and deliverables are. They're going to look at if your plan is feasible, if it's achievable within the budget and given the team that you have. So they will be looking at your project team. They'll be looking at their background and make sure that it's a good fit for what the project goals are. They're going to be looking at what they've done in the past that can contribute to the success of the innovation. So being early stage, you might just have a few people working with you. You aren't going to have an HR manager and a finance person and someone who does programmatic issues, someone who does marketing, someone who does operational development. You're not going to be a full-fledged company. Well, we want you to get to that point at this early stage. They want to make sure that you have a team to fulfill the project goals as you state them. That's the end of the application information. So I've gone through kind of the technical aspects of the kinds of technologies that we're looking for, I've gone through the stage of development that we're looking for, talked a little bit about the equity that you need to show, the impact that you need to show your innovations will have to California ratepayers. So March 1st through March 11th is the application window. That application window, it can take you up to an hour to fill out that online application. Then March 12th through 19th, we will be doing an eligibility screening. Starting March 20th, the full application window will be open. That's a 10-day window. And that application could potentially take up to 10 hours, 6 to 10 hours to complete that application. Then in the beginning of April, for a couple of weeks, we will administer the technical advisory committees to review applications. I really want to stress here a timing issue. All the top scores, we take the top scores from 4 different regions across California. Those top scores are packaged by us into a document that goes to the CEC. The CEC uses that document to kind of get all the sign-offs and approvals that they need to approve the grants. All of the grants have to be gavelled in at a CEC business meeting. Those happen every month. I wanted to step through that process because you need to know that once you submit your full application, it could be 3 months where you hear back. It could be 9 months before you hear back about the status of your application. And that's because we are kind of subject to the overall agenda of the California Energy Commission at those business meetings. And so if you think of all the different things the CEC does, we're kind of one priority for them. And so there's a lot of moving pieces to that decision-making process that are just out of our hands. And that is unfortunately the nature of working with the CEC and a lot of state funding. So we do everything we can to get them the recommendation package ASAP, and then we rattle cages. Yep.
Can I ask about the amount? This concept award is for $150,000. Is that all or nothing as far as an application, or should a venture consider asking perhaps less? Does that help?
It's just $150,000. You could ask for less, but you have the ability to get 150 more. And sometimes it's helpful to consider the CEC as being really robotic. If they see something that's not a round number that they're expecting, they're going to go, oh, wait, what's happening here? And it's just going to delay the decision process. Other questions?
Are you reviewing all applications from all areas? Because
Yes.
last year there was a little randomization. Is that out this year?
That is out this year.
Okay.
So the way we've tried to make it so that the applications are still manageable for our technical advisory committee is we've created these eligibility questions to kind of funnel applications down. And so there's the funding cap. There's those specific technology areas. We're asking to identify social and environmental impact early on. Those kinds of things to really kind of help the priorities of the program, the innovations that will advance the priorities of CalSEED, help those applications really bubble to the top. And so this year we're planning to award 25 companies. And those are going to be spread evenly across 4 regions in California, so 6 to 7 companies per region this year.
Okay. So that does, because in prior years it's been difficult for some of the Central Valley companies because there's so many from the other regions that got.
Right.
Okay, so this year it seems like it's more.
Yes. This year it's divided equally among all 4 regions in the state.
That's fantastic.
It was last year also. This year we're trying to do a little more outreach like this to try to encourage more applications from the Central Valley.
In the Central Valley region is the same as the Blue Tech Valley Innovation Cluster definition or the CEC?
Yep. Yeah.
So earlier in the presentation, you listed 3 categories of different types of energy focuses, like energy efficiency, and then there's a couple other. And the definition of, the benefit to the ratepayer varies pretty dramatically across these 3 things. For the streetlight example, you decrease the cost of this. But for some of these, for example, the electrification of industry, in your mind, how would something like that benefit the California ratepayer?
Let me go back to here. So these are the 5 kind of impact areas that have been identified from the Green Lining Institute. And with regards to electricity generation, if your manufacturing facility is located close to a disadvantaged community and you're providing job opportunities, there's a benefit. If it's decreasing pollution, there's a benefit. If you're building community partnerships, there's a benefit.
Got it. So it's not necessarily benefit the ratepayers in terms of decreasing the cost of electricity. It just has to be 3 of these 5 in terms of overall benefit. Great, thanks.
So you mentioned manufacturing being in a disadvantaged community, that would be a benefit. But some of these are so
if it's creating jobs.
If it's creating jobs. But I'm just thinking for an applicant who's very early stage, they've not probably gone into manufacturing to the material level that this is applicable for. But could it be like we are intending to do it in a cement community? Or
it could encourage, couldn't it like encourage, couldn't something like encourage you to look at doing your manufacturing in the Central Valley? So a statement that we intend to manufacture this product in the Central Valley, which will create additional economic opportunities for disadvantaged communities.
Right.
That would be a good answer to number 1.
Absolutely. And I encourage you to describe what that impact is instead of saying it's going to be a benefit. You know, try to pick up some of this language and use some of this language to describe exactly what that potential could be. Even if it is future tense, even if you are forward looking, even if it is at scale, really describe how you would prioritize, why you would prioritize locating something in a disadvantaged community. Kind of, you know, expressing your commitment, I think would go a long way.
Good.
What if you have a team that has members that are based, 2 is in the Central Valley, 1 is in San Diego, 1 is in the Bay Area? How do can they apply if they have an address? You know, a couple of team members are in the Central Valley. Is that where they would, or is it the main lead? How would you decide where they should apply?
If there's a company headquarters, you want to use the headquarters. If there's not a headquarters, it's really up to you. The requirement is it has to be in the state of California. And if you think that you would be more competitive in one of those regions, then you should try to leverage that advantage that you have.
And that comes to the address that's on the application and the zip code?
Yep. Are there any other questions?
I'm not sure I understand number 4, project citing.
Sitting.
Sitting.
Project sitting. So that's locating your project or your manufacturing in close proximity to community.
Oh, okay. So that kind of fits in a little bit with number 1, economic opportunities.
It also fits in with community partnerships.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a strong emphasis on community partnerships. I think that would get you a lot of points with the equity subcommittee because we do want to incorporate civil society organizations, community-based organizations into the clean energy economy. So if you can show a commitment to building up partnerships, you can show existing partnerships, all of those would be helpful in getting points.
Right.
There's a lot of information as well on the Green Lining Institute website that I know you work together with putting some of this together. So it might be worth it taking a look and see what kind of things they're thinking about when they put these terms.
Yeah, that's a good call.
The wording and language used.
Exactly.
Yeah, we try to go through equity a little bit so that you have an idea of what those words, how those words are used in this space, so that when you see those words on the application, you know what to talk about.
I mean, go ahead.
Could you tell us from last year how many initial applications you received from each of the 4 areas? Just approximately?
I don't have that information off the top of my head. We got 400 total from across the whole state.
Over 400.
Yeah, it was over 400, and then some of them were rejected because they were late, they were out of state. There was an initial screening, again, looking at epic alignment, so ratepayer benefit and TRL. And then from there, last year, unfortunately, we had a lottery system where there was a randomization of applications. And so this year, we're trying to not do that actively. So to get away from the lottery system, we have implemented a little bit more eligibility criteria and made that a little bit of heavier lift on the front so that we know that we're targeting exactly what the program is focused on.
How's the 4 areas divided? Population, regional, geographical?
You know, when I look at it, it looks like it's divided by population, but there's also different resources within different regions. I mean, I think in the Bay Area, you have a ton of different clean tech hubs. Los Angeles has a lot of different business innovation infrastructure groups that will help you build out your business, groups that will give you lab space. And so we want to make sure that we are capturing entrepreneurs who are not sitting right in the middle of those hubs, that we're capturing ideas that come from everywhere in the state, and that we're not favoring people just because they're located close to somewhere that has a lot of networking events. So that's the goal behind that. Yep.
So for an entrepreneur who lives in the valley already, they're thinking, and they may live in a disadvantaged community, they're thinking, I want to build my product here because I know the rents are lower, housing's less expensive, there's a workforce, and so they might be thinking, oh, I want to locate here because it's convenient and because it's cheap. But what you want us to do is kind of turn that around and say, well, yeah, you're doing it for yourself, but you're also going to be benefiting your community. So translate your own benefits into the benefits for the community.
I mean, what you're talking about really is economic opportunities.
Yeah. I mean,
And
we want it. We
cost
really
of
want it.
living is part of that economic opportunity calculation. So I think it's not too hard to spin.
Yeah, that perspective of where you're coming from. You're thinking of it from your founder
Yeah,
perspective
thinking
versus
it from
the
this,
business.
because we really want to do this. So we're not making up a story, but our story, we want it to translate into your language.
Right.
Okay, great.
Well, and you want to be able to scale too,
Yeah.
right? Like once you have your prototype, you're ready to go, you're going to need to hire people.
Yeah.
So part of building your team, you need to consider cost of living. You know, like you
Yeah,
need to
you need
consider
a
all those things that go
facility, and
into.
so
Shipping logistics from Central California to North and South.
we're right at Castle Air Force Base already. We're ready to go.
Our traffic moves.
Yeah.
On our freeways.
Okay.
So I think as long as you can frame it in terms of these benefits,
Yeah.
You should do that.
I think just to comment on the number of applications, I think we had around 40 last
Okay.
year
Okay.
from the Central Valley, and then they were randomized and 25 was picked to go into the pool of 25 from each, and from there they selected the 10, and I think there was 1 or 2 from the Central Valley that got funded last year. Yeah. So I would say this year it's almost to the Central Valley applicants' benefit if there's going to be 5 or 6 picked out of that pool of
Even more
applicants.
so.
Because
Yeah, as long
And I
as the
think
pool doesn't grow to
I think
200.
I'm hoping it will grow, but
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think this year. I'm not thinking we'll get 200, but it would be great if we could get maybe 50, 60.
But also
Yeah.
as word gets out, you know, the first year of the program is always, you know, kind of probably the fewest people. And then word will get out and from the recipients, and people are seeing what's happening, and
Yeah.
so more people will presumably apply, and so
Hopefully.
we'll see.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. And you get lots of good ideas.
And a point of encouragement from my standpoint here is that we had a Central Valley application get the top score of all the 400 plus applications from the state of California. And I thought that was really impressive. And he's from a small rural community who had, you know, a company he had been doing for some years, came up with a cool technology for water filtration, and he got the top score out of the entire state of California with a lot of competition. I thought, you know,
Who was it?
We just saw Tuesday.
Symposium.
But it is this out there? It's
Perigo
public-
welding.
Perigo welding.
Oh, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's right. Great. So now
can
so
happen.
we have to do a really good one so we can keep the tradition going.
Exactly. Definitely.
Great. Well, if you have any other questions, let me scroll through these really quickly. You can email info@calseed.fund. The website calseed.fund has the link to the portal for the application. There's an application manual that goes through all the stuff I've talked about, a little more detail, fancy graphs and charts and stuff. So you can take a look at that, you can study it, you can read it as you're kind of looking at your application. Yep.
Sorry for the interruption. I have a
That's
question about, you mentioned briefly foreign qualification of the company in the state of California. Is that upon submission of the initial application, or is that upon receiving the award?
Yeah, it's upon receiving the award. So we will ask for the address up front, but then later on in the process, you'll have to submit formal documentation, and that's where you'll have to show, if you are incorporated somewhere else, you'll have to show that you can do business here. Any other questions? Well, there's the website, there's the email account. Please email us with questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Thank
Stephanie.
you.
And Stephanie
Yeah,
on the
thank
line.
you.